Japanese, Japan's national language, is a fun and, in my opinion, beautiful language. Most importantly, games, anime, manga, music, films, doramas, and cherry blossoms are things that might attract attention of foreigners. So it's not a surprise that a lot of non-Japanese people take an interest in the language. Written Japanese is a mix of these dudes here, hiragana and katakana, and these dudes here, they're called kanji. Hiragana and katakana are phonetic scripts and mostly straightforward. There are about 70 of each, their shapes are simple, and although at first they might cause some trouble... Tsashi? What the hell is a tsashi? You can usually learn them pretty quickly. Kanji, on the other hand, are not phonetic, not necessarily simple in shape, and some of them are ridiculously similar. There are enough kanji that, for me to say there's an infinite amount would be only slightly inaccurate. To compound the issue, they have multiple readings and meanings. It is pretty clear you cannot just learn them all at once. This video is a short discussion on techniques to find out an optimal order to learn how to read kanji and how they relate to your reading ability. Notice I said reading ability. We are not concerned with writing at this moment. Firstly, why do you want to read Japanese? Do you want to work in Japan? Travel there? Read light novels, manga, play games in Japanese, participate in Japanese Twitter? It is important to look inside you and carefully try to answer this question. I'll give you 1 second. There. So, armed with the answer, what order? There are 3 common answers to this question: JLPT order, Kyoiku Kanji, and frequent kanji. JLPT is the acronym for Japanese Language Proficiency Test, or Nihongo Noryoku Shiken. It is a test that evaluates your Japanese reading and listening ability. The test goes from N5, which is the lowest, to N1, which is the highest. And although there is no official list of kanji for each test, it is not a secret which ones appear in each level. If you are studying to pass this test, this is the way to go. But for everything else, there are better ways. Kyoiku Kanji is a list of kanji taught in Japanese schools for kids up until 6th grade. This list was made to standardize education. It is the answer to the question, what kanji should be put in each year of school? Its focus is small human beings who already speak Japanese. A kid knows the word kane and kinyobi. They are not learning Japanese, they are learning how to read and write words that they mostly already know. I would recommend following this if your goal is, I don't have a goal, or I just want to learn, or something in that area. Just keep in mind that lots of considerations might have been taken in making that list that are not aligned with your particular situation. The last would be to find a list of most used kanji and go from there. That, for most purposes, is the best way. But when I searched for such a list, I did not like the results. One, which I think is the most popular one, is a list of frequency of kanji used in newspapers. And I also found this one based on some huge virtual library full of Japanese books. I don't know about you, but I'm not interested in reading newspapers in Japanese. And I'm not interested in reading old Japanese works of literature. My goal is to consume Japanese anime, manga, video games, and music. And as a secondary goal, to be able to communicate with Japanese-speaking communities that also enjoy those things. So I went out of my way to see which kanji were the most frequent in the stuff that I and maybe some of you might consume. Firstly, I have the whole script of the original Final Fantasy VII in an Excel spreadsheet. This is the only JRPG to which I have found the entire script, so as far as video games go, it's the best example to use in my opinion. If you have any other Japanese scripts from Japanese RPGs, or you know how to extract those from the games, please let me know. The second text that we're going to analyze is most of the dialogue from the three main characters of Final Fantasy VIII. This is not as close as comprehensive, but at least it can provide a sample of the kanji used by those characters in a game with more natural language. Final Fantasy VII has weird dialogue, let's put it this way. The third one is the first half of the 18th light novel from Tensei Shitara Suraimu Dattaken, or Tensura for short. And apart from the three main lists, I also got the tweet chat from a week's worth of stream from a lesser known streamer, just to check for normal, unscripted human dialogue. The process of finding, treating, and compiling all these texts into kanji frequency lists will be described in a separate video. In the end, what we get is this: a list of every kanji found, along with how many times it appeared, in descending order, of course. Although some kanji do appear in similar spots on the lists, every list is different. First thing I want to talk about is this dude here. This is ore. It is a pronoun mostly used by males to refer to themselves. This character is very prevalent. I already knew it would pop up very high on the three main lists, but I was surprised to see it get topped 100 in all four of them. This kanji is not on the Kyoiku kanji and not in the JLPT list, and it shows very far in most frequency lists you would find on the internet. But as you can see, it is absolutely necessary for any of these cases, and probably for most cases. These three kanji show up at the top 100 of all four lists and are deep in most, if not all, of the other methods. These two show up in 3 out of 4 top 100 lists, but are super important for most fantasy works. You would also take a long time to get to these following methods previously mentioned. Besides not learning absolutely necessary characters, there is also the issue of learning useless ones. Some kanji from the first 2 levels of JLPT and first 2 years of Kyoiku kanji are pretty useless. Numbers are a very good example. Apart from ichi and ni, everything else is pretty much useless. Some of these characters don't even appear on the lists at all. Ame and en are also pretty useless. For our purposes, at least, on real life, they are pretty much essential. These are only some extreme examples that I selected, just to give an idea of how using the wrong order to learn affects your reading skills when it pertains to material that really matters to you. It makes a lot of difference in the final result, as we will see. Let's say, hypothetically, that your Japanese is not hindered by lack of vocabulary, grammar, or kana. And what I mean by that is that you can understand the sentences that are written on the screen without any issue. In other words, most of the time, what is preventing you from understanding text is the kanji and nothing else. There is this sweet thing called Pareto principle that applies to languages. In the simplest of terms, it means that the top 20% of the terms in a language are going to be responsible for 80% of the text. What that means is, by learning only the top 200 kanji in a 1000 kanji list, you will understand 80% of the kanji you encounter. But the good news do not stop there. Remember, we already understand everything written in kana. And the most used kanji in Final Fantasy VII is te, with 773 instances. There is 12,000 instances of the hiragana I alone. On absolute terms, there are around 50,000 kanji on Final Fantasy VII and 250,000 kana. So, Just by knowing Kana, you already understand 83% of the contents. That, with the top 200 kanji, would mean that you understand 93.7% of the text. You are not understanding everything on Final Fantasy with the top 20% kanji, but you will understand most of it, especially with contextual and visual clues in the game. I'm also not gonna pretend that language and language learning works in a straightforward way like this. We are simplifying things a lot, but these insights are real and so are these numbers. A lot of people are put off or scared by kanji, and I know I was. People sometimes tell you that you need to know at least 2000 kanji to start reading anything. I mentioned before that I found a frequency list that used Aurora Bunko as a text to draw the frequency of kanji. On the Reddit post in which I found that list, there is a scale of kanji knowledge where the poster, and I kid you not, tries to say that unless you know more than 4000 kanji, you are essentially illiterate, which is But as I hope I showed you here, a little kanji knowledge goes a long way, and it's not all or nothing either. Especially at the beginning, the gradual improvement will be really noticeable if you learn the right ones. Anyway, now that I hopefully motivated you and hopefully convinced you to learn kanji by frequency, what's the best order? How do I find this order of kanji to learn? Well, firstly, the optimal way to learn kanji is not to learn kanji, but to learn words. But that is a separate beast that all the good channels on YouTube about Japanese have already talked about, so let's not touch that. Just assume that when I say knowing kanji, I mean knowing the use of that kanji which is necessary for your purpose. A simple example would be playing Final Fantasy VII, where most instances of the kanji te are read as te, like tetsudao, te ni ireta, aite, tegami. But as soon as you start Final Fantasy VIII, you will be met with Nyushu. So, for Final Fantasy VII, knowing only the reading as te is enough to say, I know this kanji, but as soon as you start Final Fantasy VIII, you don't. Until you learn that reading, and then you do. With that in mind, the optimal order to learn kanji is to learn them in the frequency that they appear in the material you want to read. Simple as that. But Makoto, as you showed us, different materials have different kanji usage, and I don't know programming, and I don't have access to texts to compute kanji frequency. What do I do? Well, this is the catch. Just by trying to read the stuff you want to read, you will learn kanji in the right order. Nothing else is needed, just go ahead and start reading. You will have an easier time learning the kanji that are more prevalent because you will have more opportunities to reinforce them. Don't try to learn every kanji in every sentence that you see. It's fine to look up the meaning and pronunciation of a kanji and then forget about it. If the kanji is actually important, and by important I mean it's gonna show up again later, you will learn it. This is how most people learn new words in any language, by the way, even their native tongues. They don't learn the entire dictionary just for the sake of it, but instead they organically learn words they are needed, and that's how they increase their vocabulary. The way I personally use these lists is to just use them as a measurement of how much I learned. If anyone want to know more about how I go about learning languages, I might do a follow-up, but for now, this is everything that I had to say. 以上です. Have fun reading.